Welcome everybody to another episode of Memories of Us. Today we got Emily, and Emily is here to share about her journey into grief, the book, and her book, Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief, correct?
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
And so how you doing today, Emily?
I'm great. I'm very happy to be here with you.
I'm happy that you're here. I'm happy to have you on the show. And so today, just introduce yourself to the audience. And where are you about first? What are you about?
I am in Maui, Hawaii. I live here.
All right. Wow. Hawaii. I love that. Is it beautiful over there?
It's absolutely gorgeous.
Wow. One of these days, I'm going to have to come out there and not swim with the sharks, but I would like to come out there to visit because it's a place on my bucket list. And, I would like to go there. I would definitely like to go there. I heard so many great things about all the cookouts and things like that. And I think it'd be a fun experience.
It's wonderful.
All right. So tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you got into the work that you're doing right now.
Well, I'll start off with I found myself trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life after I had two husbands die. And it's kind of an unusual situation to be in. And I had spent so much time taking care of them. I wanted to do something significant for me. And so I started writing about that. And I'm a writer. I've taught writing at the university level for many years. I'm retired from that now, but I still do it because they keep calling me back and it's all online. So I can teach in California while I live in Maui. And I love that.
Nice.
And so the more I wrote, the better I felt. And the things that I was writing, I thought, I could teach other people who are dealing with grief and loss how to write in a way that would help them too. Mm-hmm. So I started doing that. I didn't know that many people in Maui because I hadn't lived there that long at the time. And so I put a note on the Meetup group online app. And a whole bunch of people came over and we started writing together and formed a really neat community. And they got so much out of it. And we found ourselves smiling a lot and comforting each other. And it was just a great thing to do. And then the pandemic came. And so we started meeting online, but I kind of miss being able to meet on ground. Someday, hopefully we'll be able to do that again soon. Anyway, yeah. A few months into this, my second husband who died here. The reason we were here is he lived here many years before I knew him. And we came here on our honeymoon and we kept coming back to visit. And he still had so many friends here that I never saw Maui like a tourist. It was always from the perspective of someone who lives here. And I kind of fell in love with the island. So when he said that he knew what was happening with his health. And he said, I really would like to be in Maui for this. So we just sold our house and moved over here and got to stay here 2 years together before he died. And it was wonderful because we spent all of our time together and spent the time very much focusing on the moment. And several months after he died, one of his good friends on the mainland just dropped dead. I was shocked because he was much younger. He called my husband Dad, so he was a lot younger. And we were family friends with them. And I was so concerned for his wife because I knew she wouldn't be prepared for something like this. Mm. So I wrote her a letter right away and told her, these are the things you need to think about now, and these are the things you don't need to deal with now in the letter. And she let me know that letter helped her so much because nobody else talked to her about anything that was in the letter. Right. So she said it was information she really needed. And I thought, well, I can do more than this. So I decided I would write her a card every week for the first year. And once I decided that, I thought I better write down what I could put into 52 different cards because that's a lot of writing.
Yes, it is.
So I made a list. And as I looked at that list, as I was putting the cards together, I said, this is an outline. The writer in me thinks how you can write things. And I already had an outline. And I thought it would make a good book. So I got an agent and a publisher and wrote the book, and it came out this January. And it's Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief. And in doing all this work, the one thing that I found, and what I see from most places, is that there's a heaviness and a sadness in dealing with grief. And I thought, I can't live my life that way the rest of my life. I have to be able to have some joy here somehow. Right. And I remembered how in our writing group, we'd laugh together and how good that felt. And I remembered after my last husband who died, after Jacques died, I had run across Marcy Shimoff's book called Happy for No Reason. And I read that, and it helped me a lot. It really kind of shifted my perspective, and I was able to move forward once I read that book. And I thought, happiness is what's missing. So in searching around, I discovered that Marcy Shimoff had created a program to become a Happy for No Reason certified trainer, because she had been doing happiness training all over the world for years and for thousands and thousands of people. And she wanted to be able to extend her reach with all these practices that she'd come up with and what she was doing. So she created this program. So I joined that program and worked my way through it and completed it. And now I'm a certified Happy for No Reason trainer. And it fits so perfectly with what I'm doing. So the most recent thing that I've done is created something called the Grief and Happiness Alliance. And that's an online group that meets once a week. And we do writing together. We talk about our writing. Then we do happiness practices together. And we have an opportunity to talk to each other and make friends. So it's a great thing to do. And I had the idea to do that. And I thought, is this just something that I think it'd be a good idea, or would other people like to do it too? Right. So I invited a bunch of people to get together with me, and we did a pilot program and did several sessions that included what it would be like to actually come to one of the Alliance meetings. And at the last meeting, we were talking about, okay, now we've got the idea. We like the concept. We're going to move ahead with it, but it does cost some money. It's not real expensive, but everything costs money. Right. And I said, I'm torn, because I want to give this to people. I don't want to expect them to pay for it. Yet at the same time, I know when I've taught free classes in the past, people tend to drop out real fast because they don't see a value in something that's free. So in talking with this group in the pilot program, they said, well, let's form a nonprofit foundation. And then with the nonprofit foundation, we can have people attend the Alliance at no charge to them, but it still has value because the Alliance is paying for it for them to be able to come. And so that's what we're in the process of doing now. It's working out really well. We do have the Nonprofit Alliance now, Grief and Happiness Alliance nonprofit organization is what it's called. And we have the weekly meetings, and I just feel really good about what I'm doing between teaching the writing and talking to people about my book and having it be available for people to use. Yeah. And then my own podcast too, I launched this year. So in 2021. So it was a very busy year for me.
That's not a bad thing, and I'm sorry to hear about your losses and everything. And my heart is always with you. But everything else, like the book, let's talk about the book a little bit, because that sounds really, really interesting, and how it coincides with incorporating that with the happiness program. So let's talk about the book a little bit. How explain just a little bit about it.
Well, what I started off with is, as I said, I had those 52 ideas, and I thought, I'm just going to write something about, before I was really writing the book, I was just writing ideas. And so I started writing about each of those ideas and realized that I could do a chapter on each book, right? Not each book, on each subject. And so I could really explore that chapter separately. And all of them relate in one way or another to grief and loss. And they're all things to deal with, but by taking them one at a time, people aren't so overwhelmed. Yeah. And they see things are doable, they also can look at it, look at the table of contents. I'm moving my computer right now because I just realized I put it underneath my computer. Wasn't very smart. I printed this off so that I have it. But I have the table of contents here, and each one of the things on the table of contents is a different thing that you go through when you're grieving. And there are things like feeling how you feel, meditation, cocooning, loss, gratitude, judgment, being social, loneliness, your memories, what other people say to you, telling your story, feeling guilty, living in the moment. That's just a few of the 52 different things. Yeah. So I wrote a chapter on each one of those things, and the book turned out to be very long. So I had already signed a contract with my publisher for the number of words in that 52 chapter book. And they turned it over to the editor, and the editor called me and she goes, "This is way too long. We're going to have to cut it like in half." And I said, "No, you need all that." And I thought, well, if it's in half, let's make it into 2 separate books.
Right.
So this is the first of 2 books. The second one is not in publication yet, but it's written, and we're working on that so that we can get the other 26 chapters out.
Okay.
And it's meant to, I just found out yesterday that there's somebody who is teaching a grief workshop in Washington State who ordered a bunch of books to use to teach the workshop with. So I was excited about that because it's perfect for that, because you can work on one thing at a time as you're going through it and really explore it. So it's, and the chapters aren't real long, so you can really, you can read one. It doesn't have to be read in context. And I always encourage people to journal and write about what they read so that they can apply it to themselves personally and see how they can use it in their lives.
See, that is beautiful right there. And I'm definitely, you got to let me know when the second one comes out, because I'm definitely going to get both of them. Because, we've talked before, I was actually on your podcast before, and we talked for a good little while. And so I know a little bit about it. And so when we talk about the happiness aspect of it, and well, let's just back up a little bit. Let's just back up. You know what I'm saying? So, you talk about the book and what you would go through from your experiences and things like that. And now when we talk about the 5 stages of grief, because people always think that there's only 5 stages. I said, no, that's just a baseline for the other stages that you've gone through, and I can't say I've ever gone through the whole 52, but I'm really excited to see what those look like. Now, how in tune with the 5 stages of grief are they?
Well, I actually have a chapter on the stages of grief, and actually Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote a book called On Death and Dying in the early 70s. And in that book, she talked about the 5 stages of dying, not of grief.
Okay.
And there wasn't anything defined at that time for things you're supposed to go through when you're grieving or what makes you think you're doing the right thing. And people just kind of adopted her 5 stages of dying to grief. And if you really look at the 5 stages of dying, they don't all really apply to grief.
Right.
And so that kind of doesn't work. And when I was researching this book, I was amazed at all the different stages that I found. Some people said there's only 3 stages, and other people said, no, there's 12. And,
the list goes on, right?
Yeah. I came up with 52. So
see, I only came up with 17, right? But mine was a little bit different, just like everyone else's. Like, we experienced these stages of grief in such an individual way that our perception of it makes sense to us. It doesn't have to make sense to everyone else. It just has to make sense to the person that's going through it. And so, I always revert back and I go, man, that's a part of this, for what they say, this is this stage of grief right here. And then I break it down in those little sections, right? Because you see it across the board. And, I don't know, for me, I don't have a writer's brain. I have a writer's block. I'm still struggling to write my own book. So it's like, eventually it'll get out there, but it sounds, that just sounds exciting. Now, how does the happiness aspect go into it? Because when we think about grief, we think of all of the sorrow, all of the hurt that comes along with it. And it's amazing that you found a way to wrap the happiness aspect into it. So let's talk a little bit about that.
I know that sounds strange, because a lot of times when I say something to somebody about what I'm doing with grief and happiness, they go, that's an oxymoron. They don't fit together, and they don't really understand how that could be. And I really discovered it for me after Jacques died. He was my first husband that died. After he died, we'd been married 22 years, and I had never been alone in my life. I lived with my parents. I lived with my husbands. I'd never lived by myself. And sitting there by myself trying to figure this thing out, I wasn't happy at all. And I couldn't see things that would make me happy. I wasn't smiling. I also wasn't choosing to do anything about it. And it was a sad place to be. And one of my friends was concerned about me and talked to me about writing down what I was grateful for. And I said, I don't have anything to be grateful for. My husband died, And she said, well, still think about it. And I just kind of blew it off. And not too long after that, another friend of mine said the same thing to me. And I blew it off with him too. But after I got where I was by myself, just thinking about it again, I thought there must be something to it. If I've got two people that care about me saying the same thing, I need to look at this. So I thought, well, I'll write a list. Once I started writing the list, I kept finding more things to write about. I felt like I almost became addicted to writing this gratitude list because I was amazed. Because here I was thinking that my whole life was bleak and dark, and I realized that there were things that I'd enjoyed before, and there's no reason that I couldn't enjoy them now.
Right.
And I just kept writing more and more gratitude, and the more I wrote, the lighter I felt, and I felt really good. And about a year after Jacques died, it was New Year's. And I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do for New Year's, but I thought I'm going to make, instead of a list of resolutions, I'm going to commit to one thing for this year. And so I meditated on that. I thought about it for quite a while. And what came to me was to accept invitations. And when that first popped into my head, I thought, well, that's nuts. Kind of like my reaction to the gratitude list, because nobody was inviting me any place, but I wasn't putting myself out there to be invited either. Right. And so I thought, I don't know where this is going to lead, but the feeling was so strong, I thought, I'll try this. And sure enough, the invitations started coming, and they were amazing. I did things that I never in my life would have thought of to do myself. But people asked me to do things, and I said yes, because I'd made a commitment to that year saying yes when I was invited to something. And they were things like, I was asked to be on the editorial board for the newspaper that served the whole county, which was a really big county in California. And being on the editorial board was fascinating. It was a year-long term, and it was just fascinating. I met a lot of people, got really involved in what was happening in my community, in my county. And that was great. And then Jacques was a philosophy professor and a bioethicist. So he was on the ethics committee at the local regional center. And they called me and they said, there's an opening for a community person on the ethics committee. And Jacques had been a professional person on the committee, but they said they needed a community person, and they thought of me because of being Jacques' wife. And so I did that and started to working with that, which was fascinating because, again, it's life and death decisions and things that you're talking about on the committee there. And then I got asked to create a film festival for my county for the Film Commission. And I'd never thought about doing a film festival before, but I did it. And it was a fantastic experience. I learned so much, met so many people. And then I ran into one of my friends on campus where I was teaching. And she asked me what I was doing for the summer. And I said, I have no idea. I haven't thought about it. And I said, what are you doing? And she said, well, I'm taking my sister on a trip to South Africa. And I said, oh, I'd like to go to South Africa. And she said, so come with us. And I thought, okay, that's an invitation. So I said yes and got to go to South Africa too.
Wow.
And I went to Puerto Rico. I was the nurse on a ultra marathon bicycle race across the country. It's called the Race Across America, from California to New Jersey. And they cycle 24 hours a day, usually in teams. If it's one person, that person obviously has to stop and take breaks. But if they're in teams, they go the whole time, and they get all the way across the country on a bicycle in about 5 days.
Wow.
And the team that I was working with had set the record in this race many years. And so they were right up there. And that was, whoever thought about doing that? But the guy who was doing it was, the racer was my trainer, that my daughter had said, you can't sit at home, you've got to go do something. And she had a friend who was a trainer, and she suggested I go to him, and he was a bicycler. And he said, why don't you come with us on this race and help us? And what an amazing thing. All those things came because I listened when the inspiration came to me to accept invitations. And with each one of them, I found myself smiling more. I found myself happier. I found myself having things to laugh about. And I realized I was stepping in to the new me, where I didn't have to be the sad widow for the rest of my life.
Right.
I could enjoy life, and I felt so much better, and I could interact better with people. I could do anything I wanted to do, actually. And I had planned on never dating or going out or getting married again. That wasn't in my frame of reference. And I was really shocked when I met Ron, and we ended up dating and getting married and having an absolutely wonderful life together for the time we got to have together.
Wow. See, and I love that, because you got out of your way and listened to the thing that was calling you. And it just took you to all of these beautiful places, and I do something similar to that. I mean, the similarities are uncanny, but I always encourage the guys to do something that you used to do with your loved one. Mm-hmm. Just something that made you smile. For some guys is going and taking a long drive up to the mountains and everything, or is going fishing, or whatever it is, right? And it's something that you can do by yourself. And the reason why I tell them to do that is the same reason. It's a sense of gratitude. Like it'll bring you back those memories that you sometimes try to suppress, but they're there, right? You're so focused on the big moment, the moment that changed everything, that you forget all of those little moments that you smiled about, that you have with this individual. And so I find that those guys, and including myself, once we start doing those things, we become adventurous in different ways, right? Because, one of the things I used to love doing with my son was going to Chuck E. Cheese. And so when he passed away, it took me a long time because I didn't want to be around anyone. And something said, go to Chuck E. Cheese. And I went there, and I just sat there, ordered his favorite pizza, and I watched the kids play, and, even bought a couple of games for the kids. And it was so much fun, right? And I left there, and I was going, go do something else that you guys used to do. So he and I, once a week, had a Father Sunday. We go to Applebee's, and we'll have dinner and just enjoy that. And then we'll go to a movie. So I did all of those things. And just like yourself, it took me all of these different, not anywhere exotic just yet, but, I am looking forward to those things. I'm looking forward to traveling in the world and seeing those things that I didn't get the chance to see, right? And just taking that in, another form of gratitude and being appreciative of those moments and things like that. Now, is your book on Amazon?
Oh yeah, it's on Amazon. It's traditionally published, so it's available any place that books are sold. It's there's an audiobook and there's a Kindle version also.
Okay. Now let's talk about your podcast. Let's talk about what your podcast is about.
My podcast is called Grief and Happiness. It seems to be a theme with me anymore. And
beautiful.
yeah, the people that I have on my podcast that I invite onto my podcast all have some story of loss and happiness at the same time. And some of the stories have been, well, all the stories are really kind of amazing. I'm just thrilled to talk to people and see how things can work out. An example of one of them was a woman who had a good job, happy marriage. She was in her late 30s and adopted a baby. And no, she didn't adopt a baby. She had a baby by in vitro in her late 30s. And she and her husband were really happy. And not too long before her 40th birthday, she lost her job. And her husband had already planned this surprise for her to take her to France for like 3 days. When she was where they lived, it wasn't that outrageous to go there. And she says, "We can't go. I lost my job, all these things." And he goes, "No, we really need to go. I want to do this for you. It's your 40th birthday. It's special. And I really want to do it." So she finally said, "All right, I'll go." And they went, and it was the weekend before Thanksgiving. And they came home and they hosted a big family gathering at their house for Thanksgiving. And he died by the next day, just out of the blue. Had no idea it was going to happen. And so she ended up writing a book called "Take the Damn Trip," because she said she was so glad that she didn't shut him down because he was so adamant about wanting to go there, and it was a beautiful experience that they had together. And then a few weeks, or I guess it was maybe a month or two after their trip, she had already had an appointment arranged to use their last remaining embryo to try for in vitro fertilization again to see if she could have a sibling for her, I think, daughter. And she thought about it since he was gone, and she said, "No, I'm going to go ahead with this. That's what he would have wanted to have." So she did, and now she's got 2 children. She's a single mom who had just lost her job shortly before her 40th birthday when all this happened. Mm-hmm. And she's gone on to create, and I'm not sure, she didn't tell me what her business was, but she's created a business that she does from her home and makes 6 figures. And she got to that point in 3 years. So she's able to stay home with her kids. She has somebody that can help her out with the kids there so she can concentrate on working too. But she's there with the kids and has her business and has all this and loves her life, and she's happy.
That's beautiful.
And just, I think 2 weeks ago, I interviewed somebody who had been the wine buyer for Windows on the World, the restaurants at the top of the World Trade Center.
Okay.
And she happened to be helping her friend plan for her wedding the upcoming weekend on 9/11. And so she wasn't in her office when she lost over 300 friends of people that she knew that worked there.
Whoa. Wow.
Since she was in an administrative position there, and they had Windows on the World was like several restaurants and bars, and it was huge. And she dealt with all the wine cellars and, tons and tons of people that were all there, and then they weren't. So she talked about her experience with that. Now that's been 20 years, and she wasn't immediately happy right away. It took her a bit.
Yeah,
but she's Yeah, she finally she ended up moving to her hometown in North Carolina, opening a small restaurant, and now opening a brewery. So she has a restaurant and a brewery.
Mm-hmm.
And she married her. She had just started dating this guy who was a sommelier for the restaurants at Windows on the World, and he happened to not be there that day either. And so they went through all this together and ended up getting married and created this restaurant and now brewing company themselves in her small hometown, instead of living in New York like she'd been doing,
Right.
where her grandma was there and her family, and they had lots of love and support. And she's got such a beautiful smile, and she's very, very happy now. So if she can get through that much grief and come out on the other side and smile and be happy and find purpose in her life. And that's one of the big things with happiness after grief, is having purpose in your life. Right. That you're not just waking up every morning and not knowing what to do, but you're committed to making your life the best it can be, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be any particular purpose. It just has to be what you want to have your life be the best it can be.
Yeah. And I love the concept behind that, because I think that's the reason why we do these podcasts, right? To show the other side, but also to build that relationship with their audience, especially if they're looking for someone for consulting. They may not even know that you're sitting there or what you've gone through. And I know for me, a lot of times where I wanted someone around me that actually understood, I never knew. No one ever told me. They didn't say, go look here, go look there. I had to kind of figure it out along the way. And I know how hard that was. And, I know how much I struggled through going through those stages and, coming to where I am now after almost being a statistic and having to sit there and go, well, that's not what I'm going to do. But also the path that came behind it. And all of these stories that we interact with, the great and awesome guests that we have on, we all have the same similarities in common, such as, like, hey, we've been through some hard, crazy stuff. We got we struggled through it and came out of the other side, finding something beautiful to give back to the world. And I think that for me, that's beautiful. That's such a rewarding feeling. And I tell everybody, because they're like, why don't you do this? And why did you do that? I said, because if I did that, then, you may cheapen what I'm trying to give you. And like yourself, I was like, no, I need to give this away, right? Mm-hmm. I can't take it with me. So when I heard these stories like this, it's like another person just figured it out. Like, hey, I'm going to give this to someone because I think it's worth someone being able to have some sort of hope and understanding that these tools are available and you don't have to walk through grief as hurtful as it is. There's another side to it if you do so choose.
That's right. And it's hard to come to that decision. My mom never did. My mom and dad were married for 53 years. And they did a lot of traveling in the car while they were married. And when they were on the road, they would see terrible accidents at different times. And then we also, the last business my mom and dad did was owning an ambulance company, which I now own. It's over 60 years old, 62 years this year. Wow. So it's amazing that it's lasted for that long, but because they did that, and when they first started, they were going on a lot of the calls themselves, the two of them going out, and they saw so many accidents and deaths and fatalities in these accidents that Mom always told me that she and Dad were going to die in an accident, and they were going to die at the same time. It was going to be fast and they'd be dead. And I kept saying, don't say that, because it's like you're setting yourself up for it.
Right.
And when Dad died suddenly, he just had a heart attack and died. And Mom was so shocked. She couldn't believe that he did that without her. because, she had planned that she would never have to be by herself because they would always be together because that's just who they were. And she didn't smile anymore. She didn't get that involved in doing things. She mostly just sat and didn't do a whole lot. After she finally was diagnosed several years later with a brain tumor, an inoperable brain tumor, she started to smile because she knew she wasn't going to have to be around much longer. But my sister, on the other hand, followed my mom's example. My sister's 9 years older than I am. And she and her husband were both, I think he was 59 when he died. And it was tragic because he was a lab technologist in a hospital. So he was in the hospital and working with people and helping them with their health every day. And when he started having problems, he was overweight. Most of the weight was in his belly. And when he started having problems and he'd talk to the doctors that he saw, they'd all go, "Oh, just lose weight. It's nothing." Well, it was a tumor. And by the time they discovered that it was a gigantic tumor, it was that everything inside was all wrapped up and around in it. He couldn't live from it. They couldn't do surgery, and it was impossible for him to live. And if any of those doctors would have talked to him, or said, "Come on in," or "Let's get an X-ray" or something at the beginning, but all of them blew him off because they said, "You just need to lose weight." And my sister felt kind of betrayed over that, I know. And she spent most of the rest of her life sitting in a chair. And I didn't realize quite how serious it was because she lived so far away from me. Mm-hmm. But she had ended up having to be hospitalized for an emergency surgery, and her daughters called and asked if I could come up. So it was like a 5-hour trip, but I went up there, and I was shocked to see that he was on hospice when he died, and he died in his bed in the bedroom. And when I went to her house, I hadn't been to her house since he died because we lived so far away. We saw each other often with the ambulance company, but I didn't go up to where her house was. And when I walked into her bedroom and saw that the bed was gone, but it hadn't been replaced, and she'd been sitting and sleeping in that chair for years because she couldn't bear to go back in there together. She couldn't allow herself to be happy again. He was her, I think they started dating when she was a freshman in high school and he was a junior. She didn't know how to live without him. And having that example from my mom and my sister, I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to just wait for the rest of my life to be over. And that's why I retired from teaching at the university several years ago, but I still teach all the time. I've got a class, 3 classes starting in 2 weeks because I teach online, and I've taught online since the early 90s when nobody else was doing it. But it's easy for me to do that. So, yeah, I had a major jump start. So I had been teaching online while I was still, before I retired, I was doing all my classes online. And would just go to the campus for office hours because I could do the rest of it any place else. So I just knew I wasn't going to just stop doing things. People said, "Well, why do you still teach writing?" I said, "Because I love it. I love the students. I love seeing them grow and learn and what they get out of it. And the class that I teach them is so useful for anything they do in their lives." Mm-hmm. And I'm really passionate about it. So I still do that. I still have friends. Back before the pandemic, I used to go out and listen to live music a lot because I love music. Mm-hmm. I'm knowing that's coming back.
It's coming back slowly but surely.
Yeah, it's got to. But there's so many things that I can do. And one of the things that I'm doing, we bought it's about 3/4 of an acre piece of property where my house is in Maui. And there's another small house on it, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house that I rent out, but the rest of it's land. And we were growing things on it like papayas and bananas and lilikoi and stuff that I'd share. And when the pandemic started and we were having such a hard time getting food because the Hawaiian Islands are one of the most remote places in the world.
Right.
And we don't grow a whole lot here. And we're very food insecure. And when I started going to the grocery store and seeing the shelves empty, I said, I have to take action on this. So I greatly increased the size of my garden. I just did in the last couple of months, increased it yet again, really big. And every Friday I have people come over and they bring what they can spare from their garden, and I bring what I can spare from my garden, and we exchange things just for free.
Nice.
So it's a way that I can stay in touch with people. It's a way that I can be a service to people, that it's not having to I spend money on the garden, but I'm not having to buy things from the store that have been shipped over the ocean, for all that time.
Yeah.
And just are never quite that fresh. So we can have nice, fresh, good, healthy food. And it's a way of me giving back. And I discovered that was one of the things that's very important for me to do, I've had a good life and I want to pay it forward by giving back and helping other people have a good life too. And however I can do that fits right into my purpose in life. And I love being that way.
I love that. Because it sounds a lot like a lot of other people that I've talked to, acts of service, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as crazy as it is, I identified that as one of my love languages. And it's beautiful because I always, I never knew what my love languages was. And so acts of service was one of them, and time was another. And I didn't even know. Someone said, you need to read this book. And it made a lot of sense to me, especially when we're talking about grief and, the work that we do, right? We're the happiest when we serve. And it's like, okay, I'm going to get up every day and do exactly what I enjoy doing, regardless of if I understood it or not, right? I just knew that it brought me a lot of joy to be able to serve someone else and without expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, when I started Memories of Us, that's exactly what it was. And I did not understand it to save my life. I really didn't. I just knew this makes me feel good. It is a selfish thing. And everybody goes, no, it's not selfish. I go, no, I understand what you're saying, but in the same way, it's still a selfish thing for me because I do it because I like to feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm doing it for you and everything, but I'm honestly doing it because I like to feel. It brings me joy to do it. So, and I go, yeah, I know it's kind of strange. It's definitely kind of strange. So tell people how they can get a hold of you on your social media.
Well, I'm on social media all over the place. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, several groups on Facebook. There's a Writing Through Grief with Emily group on Facebook that you can join. There's a Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief group on Facebook that you can join. You have to request to get into those, so that we just have people in there that are all dealing with grief, and we can kind of control it. And my podcast, you can listen to any place you listen to podcasts, and it's Grief and Happiness. And my book you can get any place. And what's going on with me is always on my website, and you can learn more there. And my website is the same as the name of my book, Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief.com, as is my email. If you want to email me, it's Emily@lovingandlivingyourwaythroughgrief.com.
Wow. Emily, I want to say thank you again for being on the show, sharing your journey and your amazing stories. I mean, wow, that inspires me to go out and just want to do more now. It really does, because it's like I can give more, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always, I'm always searching for ways of giving. I want to say thank you again for being on, and for everyone out there that is listening in. Hopefully you guys reach out to her, join the Facebook groups. Emily is out there doing amazing work, and for you guys. And don't forget to subscribe and share it with your families. And until next time, you guys have a good day. See you next time.